Clara May Whitfield pressed her palm against the cold glass of the stagecoach window and watched the last trace of civilization disappear behind a wall of dust. Her wedding ring, the one from her dead husband, hung on a chain around her neck, bumping against her chest with every jolt of the wagon. She was 36 years old, a widow with nothing left to lose, traveling to marry a man she'd never met. A man whose last 3 brides had fled his ranch before sunset. She didn't know why they ran. She was about to find out. If you're joining us tonight, welcome. This is a story about a woman who traveled west expecting nothing and found everything. About a man hiding from his past in a valley that swallowed secrets whole. And about 2 broken people who discovered that sometimes the things we run from are exactly what we need. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe and follow this story to the very end. And drop a comment, telling me where you're listening from tonight. I love seeing how far these old frontier tales can travel. The wagon driver hadn't spoken in 2 hours. Clara counted the silence the way she'd once counted her husband's labored breaths in those final days. 1 mile. 2. The road narrowed. The sky shrank between canyon walls that rose on either side like the bars of a cage. She gripped her carpetbag tighter. "How much further?" she asked. The driver spat tobacco juice over the side. "Mile, maybe less. You've made this trip before. 4 times. He didn't look at her. "Brought 3 women up this road before you. Brought 'em all back down the same day." Clara's throat tightened. "Why'd they leave?" "Didn't say. Just came running out that house like the devil himself was chasing 'em." He finally glanced at her, his eyes flat and unreadable. "You seem different, though. Calmer. Maybe you'll last till morning." Clara didn't answer. She touched the ring on the chain around her neck. Thomas's ring, the one she'd slipped off his cold finger 2 years ago when the fever finally took him. She'd sold the farm, sold the furniture, sold everything except this ring and the skills she'd learned nursing him through 3 months of dying. Now she was here. Wyoming Territory. Summer of 1879. Traveling to marry a stranger named Silas Calhoun, who'd placed an advertisement in a Tennessee newspaper, "Rancher Seeks Wife." Remote location. Must not be easily frightened. She'd written back the same day. "I buried my husband with my own hands. I've seen things that would turn your hair white. I don't frighten easy." His reply came 3 weeks later. Brief, practical. A train ticket and directions to a stagecoach station in a town she'd never heard of. No promises, no poetry. Just an address and a single line. "Come if you're willing. Stay if you're able." The wagon crested a rise. "There," the driver said. Clara looked. The ranch sat in a narrow valley backed against rock walls that blocked out half the sky. A single-story house with a steep roof. A barn listing slightly to the left. A corral with 2 horses standing motionless in the heat. No smoke from the chimney. No movement anywhere. And a man on the porch. He stood with his arms at his sides, still as stone. Even from this distance, Clara could see he was tall, lean, wearing clothes that had seen better years. "That's him," the driver said unnecessarily. Clara's heart beat against her ribs. She forced herself to breathe. The wagon descended into the valley. The wheels crunched over dry grass. The man on the porch didn't move, didn't wave, didn't do anything except watch them approach with eyes Clara couldn't read. The wagon stopped. The driver set the brake, climbed down, reached up for Clara's bag. She couldn't let go of it. "Ma'am." His voice was almost gentle. "Time to get out." Clara released the bag, took his offered hand, stepped down onto ground that felt too solid, too real, too final. The man walked toward them. His boots made no sound on the packed earth. He stopped 6 feet away, close enough that Clara could see his face clearly. Weathered, lined, brown eyes with something broken behind them. Gray threading through dark hair at his temples. A jaw that hadn't seen a razor in several days. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at his boots. "Miss Whitfield." "Mr. Calhoun." "Just Silas." His voice was rough, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. The driver cleared his throat. "I'll be heading back before dark." Silas reached into his pocket, pulled out coins, counted them into the driver's palm with hands that trembled slightly. Clara noticed. She noticed everything. It was a habit she'd developed during all those months of nursing, watching for signs of pain, of fever, of the slow surrender that came before the end. This man wasn't dying, but something in him had died a long time ago. The driver climbed back onto his wagon. "Good luck to you, ma'am." He tipped his hat. The wheels began to turn. Within a minute, the sound of them faded around the bend. Silence. Clara and Silas stood in the clearing. The afternoon sun pressed down on them like a weight. Somewhere a bird called. Nothing answered. "You hungry?" Silas asked. "No, sir. Thank you." "Coffee's on, if you change your mind." He picked up her carpet bag, stood there holding it, not moving toward the house, just standing. Clara looked at him, at the lines around his eyes, at the way his shoulders hunched slightly forward like a man bracing for a blow. "The others," she said. The words came out before she could stop them. "The other women, why'd they leave?" Silas's jaw tightened. He looked at the house, then back at her. "You'll see soon enough." He walked toward the porch. Clara followed. What else could she do? The stagecoach wouldn't return for a week. She had $11 to her name. Enough for 3 nights at the hotel back in town. Maybe 4 if she didn't eat. The porch steps creaked under Silas's weight. He held the door open. Clara stepped past him into darkness that smelled of dust and loneliness, and something else, something sharp and medicinal that she couldn't quite place. Her eyes adjusted. One main room, sparse furniture, a cold stove, a table with 2 mismatched chairs, an oil lamp unlit. Through an open doorway, she could see a narrow bed with a military-tight quilt. Clean, bare, empty in a way that went beyond furniture. "It ain't much," Silas said behind her. Clara turned. He'd set her bag by the door and stood with his hands at his sides, not looking at her, not looking at anything. "The well's out back," he said. "Privy past that. I sleep in the side room there." He paused, swallowed. "There's a room in the back, for you, if you want it. If you—" He stopped. Clara waited. "And tomorrow," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "if you're willing, we can ride to town, see about making things proper, legal-like." The words hung in the air. He was offering marriage, not assumption, not demands, just a question wrapped in courtesy. Clara's chest loosened slightly. Whatever else this man was, he wasn't the kind to take what wasn't offered. A door stood slightly ajar across the room, half hidden in shadow. Something about it pulled at Clara's attention, the way it hung open just a few inches, like an invitation. Or a secret. "What's in there?" she asked. Silas followed her gaze. His face changed. Something flickered behind his eyes, not quite fear, not quite shame, something older than both. "Nothing," he said. "Just—" He stopped. "Storage." Clara walked toward the door. "Miss Whitfield." She pushed it open. The last light of afternoon slanted through a small window, and in that golden light Clara saw not books, not furniture, medical supplies, rows of them. Shelves lined with glass bottles filled with liquids. She recognized laudanum carbolic acid iodine. Bandages wrapped in brown paper. Surgical instruments laid out on a clean cloth with military precision. A leather medical bag, worn but well-maintained, sitting on a desk covered with papers. And books. Medical books. Gray's Anatomy. Principles of Surgery. Field Medicine for the Army Physician. Clara stepped into the room. Her hand found the nearest shelf. Her fingers brushed a bottle of chloroform. The glass was cool against her skin. "You're a doctor," she whispered. Silas stood in the doorway. His breathing was ragged. His hands gripped the doorframe so hard his knuckles had gone white. "Was," he said. "Not anymore." Clara turned to face him. The setting sun caught his face from the side, and she saw it clearly now. Not shame. Not pride. Grief. Bone-deep, soul-crushing grief that had been there so long, it had become part of him. "Why'd you stop?" she asked. Silas didn't answer for a long moment. His jaw worked. His eyes moved across the shelves like a man looking at graves. "War," he finally said. "Army surgeon. 4 years." He paused. "Saw too much. Lost too many. Couldn't—" His voice cracked. "Couldn't save the ones that mattered." Clara's throat tightened. She knew that weight. She'd carried it herself through 3 months of watching Thomas slip away, mixing medicines that didn't work, applying poultices that couldn't stop what was coming. "So you came here," she said quietly, "to forget." Silas shook his head. "Can't forget. Just stop trying to remember." Clara looked at the medical supplies, at the careful way they were organized, at the dust on some bottles and the complete absence of it on others, as if certain things still got used despite everything. "But you kept all this," she said. Silas's hands fell from the doorframe. He stepped into the room slowly like a man walking into a church he'd been banished from. "Couldn't throw it away." His voice was barely audible. "Every time I tried, I'd see their faces. The boys I couldn't save. The ones who died screaming for their mothers while I—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "While you what?" "While I held their hands and told them lies." His eyes finally met hers. "Told them they'd be fine. Told them they'd go home. Told them anything they needed to hear so they wouldn't die alone and scared." Clara's chest ached. "That wasn't lying," she said. "That was mercy." Silas flinched like she'd struck him. "The other women," Clara said slowly. "They found this room. First one opened that door, screamed, ran out. Thought I was some kind of—" He couldn't finish. Second one saw the surgical tools. Fainted dead away. When she came to, she begged the driver to take her back. And the third, she stayed long enough to ask questions. His voice went flat. I told her the truth. Told her what I'd done, what I'd seen. She looked at me like I was a monster and left before the sun went down. Clara stood in the room of medical supplies as darkness gathered outside. The last sunlight caught the glass bottles, made them glow like amber. "I nursed my husband for 3 months," she said quietly. "Watched the fever eat him alive from the inside. Mixed medicines that didn't work. Changed bandages on sores that wouldn't heal. Held his hand when he stopped breathing." Silas went very still. "I know what it's like," Clara continued, "to fight a battle you can't win, to do everything right and still lose." She touched the bottle of laudanum on the shelf. "I don't see a monster in this room, Mr. Calhoun." "Then what do you see?" Clara turned to face him. The lamplight from the main room caught her eyes. A man who cared too much to forget. A man who couldn't throw away the tools because part of him still hopes he might use them again. She paused. A man who's been waiting. Silas's breath caught. Waiting for what? Clara looked at the medical books on the shelf. At the surgical instruments laid out with such care. At the leather bag that had clearly been opened recently, despite everything he'd said about stopping. "For someone who'd understand," she said. "For someone who wouldn't run." The silence stretched between them. Outside, a nighthawk called. The sound echoed off the canyon walls and faded into nothing. Silas's hands were shaking again. He pressed them flat against his thighs to steady them. "You don't know what you're saying," he whispered. "You don't know what I've done. The men I let die because I was too slow, too tired, too—" "I know exactly what I'm saying." Clara crossed the room until she stood in front of him. Close enough to see the gray in his stubble. Close enough to smell the soap he'd used that morning, trying to make himself presentable for a bride he expected to run. "I'm saying I'll take that coffee now," she said. "And tomorrow we'll ride to town and make things proper. And after that..." She glanced at the medical supplies on the shelves. "After that we'll figure out what comes next. Together." Silas stared at her. His jaw worked. His eyes searched her face for something deception, maybe. Pity. The kind of false hope that had broken him before. He didn't find it. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you stay?" Clara thought about the 3 women who'd fled, about the empty rooms and desperate loneliness that clung to these walls, about a man who'd saved his medical supplies for 12 years without knowing why. "Because you kept the instruments," she said simply. "You couldn't save everyone, but you didn't give up completely. That matters." Silas didn't move for a long moment. Then he nodded. Once. Sharp. He left the doorway without another word. Clara heard him cross to the stove. Heard the scrape of a match. Smelled sulfur, then kerosene as he lit the lamp. Light spilled across the floor toward her, pushing back the darkness inch by inch. Clara stayed in the room of medical supplies. She ran her fingers along the spines of the textbooks, feeling the leather cracked from years of use. She opened the worn medical bag on the desk. Inside the instruments gleamed scalpels, forceps, suture needles. Clean, sharp, ready. She heard Silas moving around the main room. The clank of the coffee pot on the stove, the creak of a chair being pulled across the floor. Clara picked up a small bottle from the shelf. Quinine. She recognized it from Thomas's illness. The label was handwritten in careful script. She put it back exactly where it had been. When she finally left the room, Silas was standing at the window. The lamplight caught his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the shadows under his eyes, the weight he carried in every line of his body. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Coffee'll be ready soon," he said. Clara nodded. She sat at the table. The chair wobbled under her weight. The silence should have been uncomfortable. It wasn't. It felt like the silence between 2 people who understood something without needing to explain it. "There's a town down the valley," Silas said finally. "Silver Bend. Maybe 300 people. Ranchers mostly. Some miners since they found silver in the hills last year." "Any doctor?" Silas's hands tightened on the coffee pot. "No. Nearest one's 2 days' ride east." "What do people do when they get sick?" "Pray." He poured coffee into 2 tin cups. "Sometimes it works. Mostly it don't." Clara took the cup he offered. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint. She drank it anyway. "Seems like a waste," she said. "All those supplies in that room. All that knowledge in your head. People suffering when you could..." "No." Silas's voice was sharp. "I told you, I don't practice anymore." "Why not?" "Because every time I try, I see their faces." His hands shook so badly, he had to set down his cup. "The ones who died. The ones I couldn't save. I see them, and I freeze, and I can't..." He stopped, pressed his palms flat on the table. "I can't do it anymore." Clara didn't push. She'd learned that lesson nursing Thomas. Some wounds needed time before they could be touched. "All right," she said quietly. "Not tonight. Not tomorrow." Silas looked at her, suspicious. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm tired." Clara stood, left her half-empty cup on the table. "Which room is mine?" Silas gestured toward the back of the house. "Through there. Bed's narrow but clean. I changed the sheets this morning." Clara picked up her carpet bag. At the doorway to the back room she paused. "Mr. Calhoun." "Silas." "Silas." She turned to look at him. "Whatever happened in that war, whatever you think you did or didn't do, it doesn't change what you could still do now. For people who need you." She left before he could respond. The back room was small, 8 feet square maybe. A narrow cot with a wool blanket. one window curtainless, letting in the last gray light of dusk. Her carpet bag sat at the foot of the bed, the only familiar thing in a place full of strangers. Clara sat on the edge of the cot. She pulled Thomas's ring from beneath her collar, held it in her palm. The gold was warm from resting against her skin. "I don't know what I'm doing here," she whispered to no one. To him. To the husband she'd buried in Tennessee soil 2 years ago. "I don't know if this is right." The ring didn't answer. Clara closed her fingers around it, lay back on the narrow cot, stared at ceiling boards she couldn't see in the darkness. Through the thin wall, she could hear Silas moving around. The scrape of a chair, the clink of a cup being washed. Footsteps crossing to the room full of medical supplies. A pause. Then footsteps walking away. He'd stopped at the door. Couldn't go in. Clara understood. Some rooms held too much. Some memories were too heavy to carry twice in one day. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow they would ride to town. Tomorrow they would make things legal. Tomorrow she would become Clara Calhoun, wife of a rancher in a valley at the edge of nowhere. But tonight she was still Clara May Whitfield. Still a widow. Still carrying the ghost of a man who'd loved her and left her and taught her everything she knew about watching someone die. Sleep came slowly in pieces, and when it finally took her, she dreamed of hands, steady hands, holding instruments that gleamed in lamplight, doing work that mattered. She didn't know yet that those hands would be hers. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of boots on wooden floors. She lay still for a moment, staring at unfamiliar ceiling boards. Her back ached from the narrow cot. Her neck was stiff. Thomas's ring pressed against her chest, warm from sleep. Then she remembered where she was. Wyoming. The ranch. The man with the shaking hands and the room full of medical supplies he couldn't bring himself to use. She sat up. Gray light filtered through the curtainless window. Early morning. The air carried a chill that would burn off by noon. Clara found her wrapper in the carpet bag and pulled it on. The floor was cold against her bare feet. She opened the door quietly. Silas stood at the stove with his back to her. He'd changed his shirt, shaved. His hair was wet, slicked back from his face. He looked almost respectable. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Morning," he said. His voice was rough from disuse. "Morning. Coffee's ready. Biscuits, too." He gestured at a plate on the table. "They ain't much, but they'll hold you till we get to town." Clara sat at the table. The biscuits were dense and dry. She ate 2 anyway. Silas poured coffee into the same tin cups from the night before. He sat across from her, but didn't touch his food. Just wrapped his hands around the cup and stared at the steam rising. "You sleep all right?" he asked. "Well enough." "Cot's too narrow. I'll build you a proper bed. Soon as I can get lumber." Clara looked at him, at the careful way he avoided her eyes, at the tension in his shoulders. "You're nervous," she said. Silas's jaw tightened. "Ain't nervous. You're gripping that cup like it's trying to escape." He looked down at his hands, forced them to relax. "Just been a while," he said quietly. "Since I went to town. Since I talked to folks. They don't—" He stopped. "They don't much care for me down there." "Why not?" Silas was quiet for a long moment. "When I first came here, people got sick. Fever went through the valley, killed 8 folks in 2 weeks. His voice went flat. "They came to me for help. Heard I was a doctor, begged me to do something." Clara's chest tightened. "What happened?" "I couldn't." The words came out broken. "Stood there with my bag in my hands and couldn't move, couldn't think. Every time I looked at them, I saw the boys from the war, the ones who died screaming." He swallowed hard. 3 children died that week. 3 children I could have saved if I'd just—" He couldn't finish. Clara reached across the table. Her hand covered his. "That was 12 years ago," she said. "Don't matter. They remember. They'll always remember the doctor who let their children die." Clara squeezed his hand once, then let go. "Then we'll give them something new to remember," she said. "Starting today." They rode to Silver Bend in Silas's wagon. The road wound through the valley following the creek. The sun climbed higher. The air warmed. Neither of them spoke much. Clara watched Silas handle the reins. His hands were steady now, competent. The trembling only came when his mind turned to the past. Silver Bend appeared around a bend in the road. Maybe 40 buildings clustered where 2 trails crossed. A general store, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple, a hotel with a false front that made it look bigger than it was. People stopped what they were doing when the wagon rolled into town. Clara felt their eyes. Curiosity, suspicion, something else she couldn't name. Silas pulled the wagon to a stop in front of a small building with "Justice of the Peace" painted on the door. "Wait here," he said. He climbed down, walked to the door. His shoulders were hunched again, that defensive posture she'd seen the day before. A woman came out of the general store across the street, middle-aged, with a flour-dusted apron and sharp eyes. She stared at Clara openly. "You're the new one," the woman said, not a question. "I am." "Fourth bride he's sent for." The woman's voice carried no warmth. "Others didn't last a day." "So I've heard." "You planning to stay?" Clara met her eyes. "I am." The woman studied her for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. Not friendliness exactly, but something close to respect. "Good luck to you then," she said. "You'll need it." She went back inside the store. Silas emerged from the justice's office with a thin man in a dusty suit. The man's eyes widened when he saw Clara. "She's real," he said. "You actually got one to stay." "Her name's Clara." Silas's voice was tight. "She's going to be my wife." The justice of the peace looked from Silas to Clara. His expression was unreadable. "Well then," he said, "let's get this done." The ceremony took 3 minutes. They stood in the small office while the justice read from a worn book. No flowers, no music, no family watching. Just 2 strangers becoming husband and wife in a room that smelled of dust and old paper. "Do you, Silas James Calhoun, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Clara May Whitfield, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara looked at Silas, at the man she'd known for less than a day, at the broken doctor hiding from his past in a valley at the edge of nowhere. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you man and wife." No kiss. Silas didn't try. Clara didn't expect one. They signed their names in a ledger. Clara's hand was steady. Silas's trembled slightly, but he managed. When they walked out of the office, a small crowd had gathered. Maybe a dozen people. Ranchers in work clothes, women with children on their hips, a few miners with dust still on their boots. They stared at Silas like he was a ghost. "Calhoun." A man stepped forward. Tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 50 years old. "Heard you was bringing another woman up to that ranch of yours." Silas's jaw tightened. "She's my wife now. Legal." "Legal don't make it right." The man's voice carried across the street. "You let my nephew die, Calhoun, 8 years old, crying for his mama while you stood there doing nothing." Clara felt Silas flinch beside her. "I'm sorry," Silas said. The words came out strangled. "I'm sorry for what happened. I think about it every—" "Don't want your sorry." The man spat on the ground. "Want you gone. You and your cursed ranch and whatever fool woman you tricked into marrying you." Clara stepped forward. "That's enough." The man's eyes snapped to her. "This ain't your business." "It is now. I'm his wife." Clara's voice didn't shake. "I don't know what happened 8 years ago. I don't know why my husband couldn't help your nephew. But I know standing in the street shouting at him won't bring that boy back." The man's face reddened. "You don't know nothing about—" "I know grief." Clara cut him off. I know what it's like to lose someone you love and need someone to blame, but blame don't heal anything. It just eats you up from the inside. The crowd was silent. The man stared at Clara. His jaw worked. For a moment she thought he might hit her. Then he turned and walked away. The crowd dispersed slowly. Some people met Clara's eyes as they left. Others looked away. Silas stood frozen on the wooden sidewalk. His hands were shaking badly now. We should go, Clara said quietly. I'm sorry. His voice was barely audible. I should have warned you. Should have told you what they think of me down here. You did tell me. You said they didn't much care for you. That ain't caring. That's hate. Clara took his arm, felt the tension thrumming through his body. Let's get what we came for and go home, she said. Silas nodded. Let her lead him toward the general store. Inside, the woman Clara had spoken to earlier stood behind the counter. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes followed them as they moved through the narrow aisles. Need supplies, Silas said. His voice was hoarse. Flour, salt, coffee, whatever else you think we need. The woman nodded, started pulling items from shelves. Clara examined bolts of fabric stacked against one wall. Her fingers found a practical cotton, blue and white check, good for curtains, good for a dress if she needed one. I'll take 3 yards of this, she said. The woman measured it out, added it to the pile on the counter. You're the one who spoke up to Henry Miller, the woman said. Clara nodded. Brave or stupid? The woman's mouth twitched. Hard to tell which around here. His nephew died. Daniel Miller, 8 years old. Fever took him same week it took my sister's daughter. The woman's voice stayed flat, but something flickered in her eyes. Half the town lost someone that summer. And Calhoun. She glanced toward Silas, who was examining tools near the back of the store. He just stood there. We begged him. Got down on our knees. He wouldn't do nothing. Clara was quiet for a moment. He couldn't, she said finally. That's different from wouldn't. Don't feel different when your child's dying. No, I reckon it doesn't. The woman studied Clara for a long moment. You really planning to stay up there with him? I am. Why? Clara thought about the room full of medical supplies, about the instruments laid out with such care, about a man who'd kept everything because he couldn't let go even when letting go might have saved him. Because someone has to, she said. The woman nodded slowly, started tallying up the supplies. They were loading the wagon when the commotion started. Shouts from down the street, a woman screaming, people running toward the livery stable. Clara's head snapped up. What's happening? Silas asked. I don't know. They left the supplies and pushed through the gathering crowd. A boy lay on the ground near the corral, maybe 10 years old. His face was white, his left arm bent at an angle that made Clara's stomach turn. Horse threw him, someone said. Arms broke bad, bones poking through the skin. Clara pushed forward, knelt beside the boy. It was bad. The bone had snapped clean through. Blood soaked his sleeve. His eyes were glassy with shock. Someone get a doctor. A woman shoved through the crowd. The boy's mother Clara guessed from the way she threw herself down beside him. Please, someone. Her eyes found Silas standing at the edge of the crowd. You. Her voice cut through the noise. You're a doctor. Help him, please. Silas didn't move. Clara looked up at him, saw the color drain from his face, saw his hands start to shake, saw the frozen terror in his eyes. Silas, she said sharply, I need your help. He shook his head. I can't do it. I'll kill him. He'll die if you don't. Silas's breathing came fast and shallow. His hands trembled so badly he couldn't have held a needle if he'd tried. Clara made a decision. Then tell me what to do, she said. Talk me through it. You don't have to touch him. Just tell me what to do. Silas stared at her. Now, Silas. Something shifted in his eyes. The panic didn't disappear, but something else rose beside it. Purpose. "You need to stop the bleeding," he said. His voice shook, but the words were clear. "Press here above the break, hard, cut off the blood flow." Clara pressed her hands where he indicated. The boy whimpered. "Good. Now the bone needs to be set before we can splint it. You'll have to push it back in." Clara's stomach lurched. "I'll talk you through it. You can do this." The crowd watched in silence. Clara took a breath, steadied her hands. "Tell me exactly what to do." "Feel along the bone. Find where it broke." She did. The boy screamed. His mother held his other hand and wept. "The ends need to align. You'll have to pull the arm straight and push the bone back into position." "Won't that hurt him?" "Yes." Silas's voice cracked. "He needs something to bite on. A belt, a stick, something." Someone handed Clara a leather strap. She got it between the boy's teeth. "Now," Silas said. "Pull straight. Don't hesitate. The longer you wait, the worse it is." Clara pulled. The boy's scream tore through the air. His body convulsed. Clara felt the bone shift under her hands, felt it grate against itself, felt it finally mercifully slide back into place. "Good." Silas's voice was steadier now. "That's good. Now we need to splint it. 2 straight pieces of wood, something to wrap it with." Someone handed Clara broken pieces from a crate. Someone else produced strips of clean cloth. She worked while Silas talked. His instructions were clear, precise, the words of a man who had done this hundreds of times, even though his hands couldn't do it anymore. When the splint was secure, Clara sat back on her heels. The boy had passed out from the pain. But he was breathing. His arm was set. The bleeding had stopped. Clara's hands were covered in blood. "He needs proper stitching," Silas said. "The wound's got to be cleaned. Infection's the real danger now." Clara looked at him. "Can you do it?" Silas looked at his hands. They'd stopped shaking. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Try." The crowd parted as Silas stepped forward. He knelt beside the boy, looked at the wound. His hands moved toward it, hesitated, moved again. "I need carbolic acid," he said. "Hot water, needle and thread. My bag's at the ranch, but if someone's got..." "Store's got needle and thread?" someone called out. "Mrs. Perkins has carbolic." People scattered to gather what he needed. Silas stayed kneeling beside the boy. His breathing was still too fast. His jaw was clenched so tight, Clara could see the muscles jumping. But he didn't run. Mrs. Perkins, the woman from the store, brought the carbolic acid herself. She handed it to Silas without a word. "I'll need to close the wound," Silas said. His voice had gone clinical distant, the voice of a doctor working a problem. 4, maybe 5 stitches. Someone hold the arm steady." Clara held the arm. Silas threaded the needle. His hands trembled, but when the needle touched flesh, they went still. He worked in silence. 1 stitch, 2, 3, 4. Each one precise. Each one perfect. The muscle memory was still there, buried under years of fear and guilt. When he finished, he wrapped the wound in clean bandages and sat back. "He'll need watching tonight," he said. "Fever, redness, swelling. Any of that you send for me." The boy's mother looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Silas didn't answer. He stood abruptly, walked away from the crowd, disappeared around the corner of the livery stable. Clara found him behind the building, bent over with his hands on his knees, gasping for breath. "I did it," he said. His voice was ragged. "I actually did it." "You did." "My hands stopped shaking. When I touched him, they just stopped." Clara stood beside him, didn't touch him, just waited. 12 years, Silas said. 12 years I've been telling myself I couldn't. And I just... He straightened, looked at her. "You made me," he said. I asked you. You did the rest. Silas shook his head. No, you saw something. Same as you saw those supplies in my room. Same as you saw. He stopped. I don't know what you see when you look at me. But whatever it is, I want to be that man. Clara looked at him. At the blood on his hands. At the fear still lurking behind his eyes. At the hope starting to replace it. You already are, she said. They stayed in town long enough to check on the boy again. He was awake, groggy, but coherent. His mother couldn't stop thanking them. Word spread fast. By the time they reached the wagon, people were looking at Silas differently. Not with forgiveness exactly. Not with trust. But with something other than pure hatred. It was a start. They loaded the supplies in silence, climbed onto the wagon, started the long ride back to the ranch. The sun was past its peak when they reached the canyon road. I should check on him tomorrow, Silas said suddenly. The boy. Make sure no infection sets in. Clara nodded. I'll come with you. You don't have to. I know. They rode in silence for a while. The woman at the store, Clara said. Mrs. Perkins. She said her sister's daughter died in that fever, 8 years ago. Silas's hands tightened on the reins. Martha Perkins. Her niece was named Sarah, 5 years old. I remember every one of them, every face, every name. She gave you the carbolic acid. I noticed. That means something. Silas was quiet. Maybe, he said finally. Or maybe she just wanted the boy to live. Didn't matter who saved him long as someone did. Either way, you were the one who did it. The ranch came into view around the final bend. Clara felt something settle in her chest when she saw it. Not quite homecoming, but something close. Recognition, maybe. The feeling of arriving somewhere that could, given time, become familiar. They unloaded the supplies in silence. Silas carried the heavy sacks. Clara organized the provisions in the bare kitchen. When everything was put away, Silas stood in the middle of the main room looking lost. I don't know what to do now, he said. What do you mean? This morning I was just... He gestured vaguely. Surviving, getting through each day. And now? Now you saved a boy's life. Now everything feels different. He looked at her. You're my wife. There's food in the kitchen. Someone in town might actually not hate me. His voice cracked. I don't know how to live like this. Clara walked toward him, stopped an arm's length away. We learn, she said, day by day, same as everyone else. Silas studied her face. Why ain't you scared of me? He asked. Should I be? Most people are. Or disgusted, or something. Clara thought about the question, thought about the room full of medical supplies, about the trembling hands and the broken voice and the 12 years of silence. I was married to a good man, she said. Watched him die slow. Watched the fever take everything he was piece by piece. By the end I knew every kind of fear there is. She paused. You don't scare me, Silas. You're just a man carrying more than he should have to carry alone. Silas's throat worked. I don't know how to stop carrying it, he whispered. You don't stop. You just find someone to help you hold the weight. The lamplight flickered. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the canyon walls in shades of red and gold. Silas turned away, walked toward the room full of medical supplies, stopped at the door. I'm going to need to restock, he said. His voice was rough. If I'm going to start again, going to need more carbolic, more bandages, suture thread. Make a list. We'll order what you need. Silas nodded, pushed the door open, stepped inside. Clara watched him move among the shelves, watched him touch the bottles and instruments with something that looked almost like reverence. He'd been waiting for permission. For 12 years he'd been waiting for someone to tell him it was all right to try again. Clara had given him that. Now they'd find out together what he could become. The next morning, Silas hitched the wagon before Clara finished her coffee. "The boy," he said when she raised an eyebrow. "Need to check on him." They rode to town together. The boy, whose name was Samuel Garrett, was doing well. No fever, no swelling. His mother cried again when she saw Silas at her door. "He slept through the night," she said. "First time he's smiled since the accident." Silas examined the wound, changed the bandages. His hands were steady the whole time. "Keep it clean," he said. "Keep it dry. I'll come back in 2 days to check again." Mrs. Garrett tried to press coins into his hand. Silas refused. "Just take care of your boy," he said. Word spread even faster this time. By noon, 3 more people had found them. A rancher with a persistent cough, a miner with a gash on his leg that wasn't healing right, a young mother with a baby who wouldn't stop crying. Silas saw them all. Some in town, some at the ranch. His hands trembled at the start of each examination, but steadied once he began working. Clara watched him transform. The broken man she'd met 3 days ago was still there. The fear, the guilt, the weight of 12 years of failure. But something else was emerging beneath it. Confidence. Purpose. The doctor he'd been before the war broke him. By the end of the first week, people were calling him Doc Calhoun again. Not everyone. Henry Miller still spat when he saw them. A few others crossed the street to avoid them, but the tide was turning. Then Marcus Thornton arrived. It was a Thursday afternoon. Clara was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard horses approaching. 3 men, well-dressed, city clothes covered in trail dust. The leader was maybe 50 with silver hair and a gold watch chain across his vest. He dismounted smoothly, looked at the ranch with an appraising eye. "Mrs. Calhoun, I presume?" Clara wiped her hands on her apron. "That's right. My name is Marcus Thornton. I represent the Silver Ridge Mining Company." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I wonder if I might have a word with your husband." Silas emerged from the house. He'd been reorganizing his medical supplies, and his sleeves were still rolled up. "What do you want?" he asked. Thornton's smile widened. "Direct. I appreciate that." He pulled a folded document from his coat pocket. "I'm here to make you an offer, Mr. Calhoun, for your land." Silas's jaw tightened. "It ain't for sale." "Hear me out. The silver vein we're working runs directly under this valley. Your property sits on the best access point. We're prepared to offer you $500 for the land and buildings. Quite generous considering the condition of the structures." Clara's stomach dropped. "I said it ain't for sale." Thornton tucked the document back into his pocket. "That's unfortunate, because I'm afraid you don't actually have a choice." His voice hardened. "You see, Mr. Calhoun, we've done some research. Your deed is irregular. The previous owner's claim was never properly filed, which means this land technically belongs to the territory, and the territory has granted mineral rights to our company." Silas went pale. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Thornton gestured at one of his men who produced another document. "Survey records, filed 6 months ago. This entire valley falls within our extraction zone. We can take this land through legal channels whenever we choose. The $500 is a courtesy, a way for you to walk away with something instead of nothing." Clara stepped forward. "We'll need to see those documents." Thornton raised an eyebrow. "And you are his wife, and I can read." Something flickered in Thornton's eyes. Respect, maybe, or amusement. "By all means." He handed her the survey document. "Take your time. But understand this, we're prepared to begin operations within 60 days, with or without your cooperation." Clara scanned the document. Legal language dense and complicated. But she caught the key phrases: mineral extraction rights, territorial easement, eminent domain provisions. "This says you can access the minerals," she said slowly. "Not that you own the land itself." Thornton's smile thinned. A technical distinction. Technical distinctions matter in court. Thornton studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Silas. "Your wife is clever," he said. "But cleverness won't stop progress, Mr. Calhoun. This valley is worth millions in silver. You're one man with a failing ranch and a checkered past." He mounted his horse. "Take the money. Walk away. It's better than the alternative." "What alternative?" Silas asked. Thornton gathered his reins. "Let's just say that people who oppose the company tend to encounter difficulties, legal troubles, business problems, accidents." He tipped his hat. "I'll give you 1 week to reconsider. After that, we proceed through other channels." The 3 men rode away. Clara and Silas stood in the yard watching until they disappeared around the bend. "He's going to take everything," Silas said. His voice was hollow. "The ranch, the house, everything I built." Clara looked at the document still in her hands, at the legal language and the official seals and the weight of corporate power behind every word. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe not." "You saw those papers. He's got the law on his side." "He's got paperwork on his side. That ain't the same thing." Clara folded the document carefully. "We need to find out if this deed issue is real. If it is, we fight it. If it ain't, we call his bluff." "How?" "The land office in town. They'll have records. And if Thornton's been lying about the mineral rights, there'll be evidence." Silas shook his head. "Even if we find something, he's got lawyers, money, power. We've got nothing." Clara looked at him, at the defeat already settling into his shoulders. "We've got the people you've been helping," she said. "Mrs. Garrett, the rancher with the cough, the miner with the bad leg. That's not nothing. It ain't enough to fight a mining company." "Maybe not alone." Clara took his arm. "But we're not alone anymore. Are we?" Silas met her eyes. Something passed between them. Not quite agreement, not quite hope, but something close enough to keep fighting. "No," he said quietly. "I reckon we're not." The land office in Silver Bend was a cramped room at the back of the courthouse. Dust covered everything. Filing cabinets lined the walls stuffed with papers that hadn't been organized in years. Clara stood at the counter while a clerk named Virgil Henderson searched through drawer after drawer. "Calhoun," he muttered. Calhoun. Here." He pulled out a faded document and spread it on the counter. Clara leaned forward. Silas stood beside her, his jaw tight. "This is the original deed," Virgil said, "filed in 1867 by a man named Walter Calhoun. Your father, uncle," Silas said. "He left me the land when he died." "And you filed the transfer of ownership." Silas's face went pale. There was paperwork. I signed things." Virgil flipped through more pages. His frown deepened. "Here's the problem." He pointed to a section of the document. "The transfer was never completed. Your uncle's death certificate was filed, but the ownership change—" He shook his head. "It's still listed under Walter Calhoun, deceased." Clara's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" she asked. "Means legally Silas don't own the land. It's been in probate for 12 years. Virgil looked at Silas with something like pity. "Thornton's lawyers probably found this months ago, been waiting for the right moment to use it." Silas gripped the counter edge. His knuckles went white. "Can we fix it?" Clara asked. "File the right paperwork now." "Maybe, but it'll take time, weeks, maybe months. And if Thornton's already filed a claim through territorial channels—" Virgil spread his hands. "It's a race, and he's got a head start." They left the land office in silence. The street was busy with afternoon traffic. Wagons rumbled past. People called greetings to each other. Normal life going on while Clara's world tilted sideways. "I should have checked," Silas said. His voice was hollow. "When Uncle Walter died, I was so deep in my own misery I just signed whatever papers people put in front of me. Didn't read them. Didn't care. You couldn't have known this would happen. I should have. He stopped walking, turned to face her. Clara, I've ruined everything. The ranch, the practice, I was starting our marriage. Everything. Clara looked at him, at the defeat in his eyes, at the way he was already surrendering. No, she said. What? I said no. She grabbed his arm. We're not giving up. Not yet. You heard Virgil. Thornton's got lawyers, money, a head start. What do we have? We have the truth, and we have people who owe you. Silas shook his head. Nobody owes me anything. Samuel Garrett owes you his arm, maybe his life. Mrs. Patterson owes you her baby's health. Old Pete Dawson can walk again because you fixed his leg. Clara's grip tightened. That's not nothing, Silas. That's a community. A community that hated me 2 weeks ago. People change. You changed. She pulled him toward the general store. Come on. We need to talk to Mrs. Perkins. Mrs. Perkins listened to their story without interruption. When Clara finished, the older woman's face was grim. Thornton, she said. I know that name. His company bought up 3 ranches north of here last year. Families that had been there for generations. Just gone. How'd he do it? Clara asked. Same way he's doing it to you. Found problems with deeds. Filed claims through the territory. Brought in lawyers from Denver to tie everything up in court, Mrs. Perkins's jaw tightened. By the time the courts sorted it out, the families had spent everything they had on legal fees. Had no choice but to sell. Clara's heart sank. But there was one family, Mrs. Perkins continued. The Walters. They didn't sell. Silas looked up. What happened to them? Their barn burned down. Mysterious fire in the middle of the night. A week later, their well got poisoned. Dead cattle everywhere. Mrs. Perkins' voice dropped. Month after that, Tom Walter got thrown from his horse. Only he swore the horse was spooked by gunfire. Couldn't prove it, though. Clara felt cold. Did they leave? Had to. Nothing left to stay for. The store was quiet. Dust motes floated in the afternoon light. So we fight, Clara said slowly. And we lose everything. Or we don't fight, and we still lose everything. That's about the size of it. Mrs. Perkins leaned forward. Unless you can find a way to beat them at their own game. How? The territorial law. I don't know the details, but I heard once that if you can prove continuous productive use of disputed land, it strengthens your claim. Something about homesteading provisions. She shrugged. Might be worth looking into. Clara and Silas exchanged glances. Where would we find that information? Silas asked. Judge Morrison. He knows territorial law better than anyone in the county. Mrs. Perkins hesitated. But he's not going to help you out of the goodness of his heart. Morrison's practical. He helps people who can help him. What does he need? Mrs. Perkins almost smiled. His wife's been sick for months. Doctors in Denver can't figure out what's wrong with her. Maybe if someone with medical training took a look. Clara felt hope spark in her chest. It wasn't much, but it was something. They found Judge Morrison at his home on the edge of town. A sturdy house with a wraparound porch and curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. The judge answered the door himself. He was 60, maybe older, with white hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Calhoun, he said, no surprise in his voice. I heard you were practicing again. Yes, sir. And you must be the wife, the one who stayed. Morrison studied Clara with those sharp eyes. I heard about you too. Heard you stood up to Henry Miller in the street. Took courage. Just common sense, sir. Same thing sometimes. Morrison stepped back from the door. Come in. I reckon you're here about Thornton. They sat in his parlor while Morrison listened to their situation. He asked pointed questions, made notes on a small pad. When they finished, he set down his pencil. The deed issue is real, he said. Without proper transfer of ownership, your claim is vulnerable. Thornton's lawyers know exactly what they're doing. Is there any way to fight it? Clara asked. Maybe. The homesteading provision Mrs. Perkins mentioned, it's called the Productive Use Clause. If you can prove you've been actively developing the land, providing services to the community, building something of value, the territory might recognize your claim regardless of paperwork problems. What kind of services? Morrison leaned back in his chair. Medical services would qualify if you were running, say, an informal clinic, treating the community's sick and injured. That would be considered productive use of the property. Silas's hands were trembling again. Clara reached over and covered them with her own. How would we prove it? She asked. Documentation, records of patients treated, witness statements from people you've helped. The more evidence, the better. Morrison paused. You'd also need to establish that you're operating continuously, not just occasional visits, a real ongoing practice. We can do that, Clara said. Morrison's eyes moved to Silas. Can you? Silas didn't answer immediately. His jaw worked. His shoulders were tight. I don't know, he said finally. Every time I think I'm past it, something happens. My hands start shaking. I freeze up. What if I'm treating someone and I just stop? Then your wife helps you, Morrison said simply. Same as she did with the Garrett boy. You're not alone anymore, Calhoun. Stop acting like you are. The words hit Silas like a physical blow. Clara saw him flinch. There's something else, Morrison said. He stood slowly like a man carrying a heavy weight. My wife, Margaret. She's been ill for 4 months. Fatigue, pain in her joints, spells where she can't think straight. The doctors in Denver said it might be her heart, or her nerves, or her imagination. His voice hardened. She's not imagining it. I could examine her, Silas said. That's what I'm asking. Morrison met his eyes. You help my wife, I'll help you with Thornton. Fair trade. Where is she? Upstairs. Hasn't been able to come down in 3 weeks. Clara and Silas followed Morrison to the second floor. The bedroom at the end of the hall was dim. The curtains were drawn. A woman lay in the bed propped up on pillows, her face pale and drawn. Margaret, Morrison said gently. The doctor's here. Her eyes opened, blue eyes clouded with pain and exhaustion. Another one, she murmured. How many does that make? This one's different. Morrison stepped aside to let Silas approach. This one stayed in a haunted valley for 12 years and didn't run. I figure he's got more patience than most. Silas knelt beside the bed. His hands were steady now. The trembling had stopped the moment he had a patient to focus on. Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to ask you some questions. Then I'm going to examine you. Is that all right? She nodded weakly. Clara watched from the doorway as Silas worked. He asked about symptoms, about when they started, about what made them better or worse. His voice was gentle but thorough. He examined her hands, her neck, her joints, pressed carefully along her spine, asked her to move her fingers, her wrists, her arms. Has she had any rashes? Silas asked Morrison. Red patches on her face maybe, across her cheeks and nose. Morrison frowned. Yes, months ago. Doctor said it was sun exposure. And her hair. Has she been losing more than usual? How did you know that? Silas sat back. His face was troubled. I've seen this before, he said. During the war. Not often, but enough to recognize it. He looked at Mrs. Morrison. Ma'am, I need to ask you something personal. Have you had any problems with your kidneys? Pain when you pass water? Blood in your urine? Mrs. Morrison's eyes filled with tears. Yes, I was too ashamed to tell the Denver doctors. Silas nodded slowly. I think I know what's wrong with you. What? Morrison stepped forward. What is it? It's called lupus, a disease where the body attacks itself. The rash, the joint pain, the fatigue, the kidney problems, they're all connected. Silas paused. There's no cure. But there are things we can do to manage it. Keep her comfortable. Slow the progression. Morrison's face was gray. How long does she have? That's not how this works. Some people live for years with this condition, decades even. But she needs careful treatment, rest, avoidance of sun exposure, willow bark tea for the pain and inflammation. Silas stood. I'll write down everything she needs. Check on her every few days. Morrison gripped Silas's hand, hard. You just did in 10 minutes what 3 Denver doctors couldn't do in 4 months, he said. His voice was thick. Whatever you need, Calhoun, I'm your man. They left the Morrison house as the sun was setting. Clara's mind was racing. The productive use clause, documentation, witness statements, a deadline they didn't know but could feel pressing closer every day. We need to start keeping records, she said. Every patient you see, every treatment you give. Names, dates, what was wrong, what you did. I can do that. And we need more patients, not just emergencies, regular visits, people coming to the ranch for care. Silas nodded, but his face was troubled. What is it? Clara asked. Morrison's wife, lupus. He shook his head. I told him there's no cure. But during the war, I saw a doctor try something. An extract from a bark they brought from South America. Quinine mixed with something else. Some of the patients improved. Can we get it? Maybe. It's not common, expensive, and I don't know the exact formula. He looked at her. But if it works, it could help Mrs. Morrison, and others like her. Then we find a way to get it. They rode home in the gathering dark. The ranch was quiet when they arrived, too quiet. Clara felt something wrong before she could name it. Silas pulled the wagon to a stop. His hand moved to the rifle behind the seat. Stay here, he said. No. Clara. I said no. They climbed down together, walked toward the house. The front door was open. Clara was certain she'd closed it when they left. Silas pushed the door wider with his boot. Inside, the house had been ransacked, furniture overturned, supplies scattered across the floor. The medical room torn apart, bottles smashed, instruments thrown everywhere. Clara's knees went weak. Silas walked through the destruction in silence. His face was stone. His hands hung at his sides. In the medical room, Clara found a note pinned to the wall with a surgical knife. She pulled it down, read it. Her blood went cold. What does it say? Silas asked. Clara handed him the paper. His eyes moved across the words. His jaw tightened until she could hear his teeth grinding. 1 week, he said. They're giving us 1 week to accept the offer, or this is just the beginning. Clara looked at this destruction around them, at 12 years of carefully preserved medical supplies scattered and ruined. They want us to be afraid, she said. Aren't you? Yes. She met his eyes. But I'm also angry, and right now angry is stronger. Silas looked at the smashed bottles, at the instruments he'd kept with such care, at everything he'd built being torn apart in a single afternoon. Something shifted in his face. Then we fight, he said. They worked through the night. Some supplies were salvageable. Clara sorted through the wreckage while Silas cleaned and organized what remained. By morning, they had a fraction of what they'd started with. But it was enough. Word spread fast. By noon, people started arriving. Mrs. Garrett with a basket of food. Old Pete with tools to fix the broken furniture. The Patterson family with linens and bandages. Even Mrs. Perkins came bringing carbolic acid and iodine from her own store. Thornton did this, she asked, surveying the damage. Can't prove it, Clara said. But yes. Mrs. Perkins' face hardened. He's gone too far. This ain't just about land anymore. This is about whether one company can bully an entire town. What do you mean? People are talking. About what happened here. About what happened to the Walters. About what Thornton's doing to the valley. Mrs. Perkins lowered her voice. There's a meeting tonight, at the church. Folks want to decide together what to do. Clara's heart lifted. We'll be there. The church basement was packed. 40 people, maybe 50. Ranchers, miners, shopkeepers, farmers. families that had lived in this valley for generations, and newcomers who'd arrived just months ago. They all looked at Silas and Clara when they walked in. Judge Morrison stood at the front. He raised his hand for silence. "We all know why we're here," he said. "The Silver Ridge Mining Company is trying to take over this valley. They've already destroyed one ranch, possibly two. Now they're targeting Dr. Calhoun." "He ain't a real doctor," someone called from the back. "He let my cousin's boy die." "That was 12 years ago," Morrison said firmly. "And from what I hear, the boy had typhoid. No doctor could have saved him." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "What matters now," Morrison continued, "is what happens next. Thornton's not going to stop with the Calhoun Ranch. He needs water rights for his mining operation. Half the properties in this valley sit on streams and springs he'll want to control." "So what do we do?" another voice asked. "We stick together." Morrison looked at Silas. "Dr. Calhoun has agreed to provide medical services to anyone who needs them. In exchange, we support his land claim through the productive use provision. Witness statements, documentation, whatever the territorial court needs." Henry Miller stood up. His face was red with anger. "You're asking us to help the man who killed my nephew." The room went silent. Silas stepped forward. His hands were trembling, but his voice was steady. "I didn't kill your nephew, Mr. Miller. The fever did that. But I could have tried harder to save him. I could have done something instead of standing there frozen while he suffered." He paused. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it. But I'm asking for a chance to do better. To be the doctor I should have been 12 years ago." Miller's jaw worked. His hands clenched into fists. "You think pretty words change anything?" he demanded. "No, sir. I think actions do." Silas met his eyes. "Samuel Garrett's arm is healing because I said it. Mrs. Morrison finally knows what's wrong with her because I diagnosed it. Old Pete can walk again because I fixed his leg." He spread his hands. "I can't undo the past, but I can try to make the future better." The silence stretched. Miller looked around the room, at the faces watching him, at the people he'd known his whole life, waiting to see what he would do. "If you let this man help us," Miller said slowly, "and he fails again, I'll hold every one of you responsible." Then he sat down. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't opposition either. Morrison cleared his throat. "All in favor of supporting Dr. Calhoun's claim?" Hands went up, one by one, then more, then most of the room. Clara counted. 32 in favor, 8 opposed, the rest abstaining. "The motion passes," Morrison said. "We stand together." After the meeting, people lingered. Some came to shake Silas's hand. Others offered supplies, food, whatever they could spare. A few just nodded from across the room, acknowledging something without words. Mrs. Patterson approached Clara. "Thank you," she said, "for what you did, for making him see what he could be." Clara shook her head. "I didn't make him anything. He was already a doctor. He just forgot for a while." Mrs. Patterson smiled. "That's exactly what I mean." They walked home under a sky full of stars. The ranch was dark, but Clara could see the repairs already taking shape. New boards on the porch, a straightened door frame, signs of a community rallying together. "They helped us," Silas said. Wonder in his voice. "People who hated me for 12 years, they actually helped us." "They didn't hate you. They were hurting. There's a difference." Silas stopped walking, turned to face her. "Clara." His voice was rough. "When you came here, I thought you'd run like the others. I was ready for it. Expected it." He paused. "But you stayed. You saw that room full of medical supplies, and you didn't see a monster. You saw a man worth believing in," Clara said. Silas's throat worked. His eyes glistened in the starlight. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to." Clara took his hand. "Just keep being the man I saw. That's enough." They stood together in the darkness. Two people who'd come to each other broken and were slowly, carefully building something whole. Then, hoofbeats sounded on the road. Fast. Urgent. Coming toward the ranch at full gallop. Silas tensed. His hand moved toward the pistol at his hip. A rider appeared out of the darkness. Young, maybe 16. Covered in dust and wild with fear. "Doc Calhoun," he shouted. "You gotta come. There's been an accident at the mine. Cave-in. Men trapped underground." Clara's blood went cold. "How many?" Silas asked. 12, maybe more. They're digging them out now, but some of them are hurt bad. Crushed legs, broken bones, bleeding." The boy's voice cracked. "Please, Doc, you gotta help." Silas looked at Clara. In the darkness, she could see the fear in his eyes, the old terror rising again. "Go," she said. "Come with me." "Always." They grabbed the medical bag. What supplies remained, loaded them into the wagon, and rode toward the mine. The scene was chaos. Torches everywhere. Men digging frantically at a collapsed tunnel entrance. Women crying. Children watching with wide, terrified eyes. And in the middle of it all, Marcus Thornton. He stood apart from the workers, watching with that same cold smile. When he saw Silas and Clara arrive, his expression shifted to something like amusement. "Dr. Calhoun," he said. "How convenient. I was just about to send for a medical professional." Silas ignored him. Pushed through the crowd to where injured miners lay on the ground. Clara counted. 7 men already pulled from the wreckage. 3 conscious, moaning with pain. 2 unconscious. 2 that weren't moving at all. 5 more trapped, someone shouted. "Can hear 'em calling. But the tunnel's unstable. One wrong move, and the whole thing comes down." Silas knelt beside the first injured man. Broken ribs, punctured lung. Clara could see it from the way he was breathing shallow and wet. "I need clean cloth," Silas said. "Water. Whatever you can find." People scrambled to help. Clara moved to the next patient, a crushed leg. The bone was visible through torn flesh. She'd seen wounds like this before when Thomas had tried to butcher a hog and the animal had kicked him. She knew what to do. "Silas, this one needs a tourniquet." He looked up from his patient, saw what she was dealing with, nodded. "Above the knee, tight as you can make it. Then we'll need to stabilize the bone before we move him." Clara worked. Her hands were steady. The skills she'd learned nursing Thomas, the techniques she'd watched Silas demonstrate over the past weeks, they all came together. Around her, the chaos continued. Shouts from the rescue workers. Screams from somewhere underground. The creak of timber threatening to give way. Then a new sound. Gunfire. Clara's head snapped up. Near the mine entrance, a fight had broken out. 2 of Thornton's men were struggling with local miners. Fists flew. Someone pulled a pistol. "Stop!" Silas's voice cut through the noise. "There are men dying here. Whatever your quarrel is, it can wait." The fighting paused. Everyone looked at the doctor kneeling in the dirt, covered in blood, trying to save lives. Thornton stepped forward. "He's right," he said smoothly. "This is hardly the time for violence. Let's focus on the rescue." But Clara had seen something. In the moment before Thornton spoke, his eyes had flickered toward the mine entrance, toward the unstable tunnel. He wasn't worried about the trapped men. He was calculating. Clara pulled Silas aside while he was moving between patients. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "Everything's wrong. There are men dying." "No, listen." She gripped his arm. "Thornton's not acting like a man whose workers are trapped underground. He's acting like a man waiting for something." Silas's eyes narrowed. He looked toward the mine entrance, toward Thornton standing calmly at the edge of the chaos. "The cave-in," Clara said slowly. "What if it wasn't an accident? Why would he collapse his own mine? To destroy evidence, to create a crisis that distracts everyone while he does something else." Clara's mind was racing. "Or to kill someone specific who's trapped down there." Silas's face went pale. "The ownership documents," he said. "Virgil mentioned that the original deed was filed by someone who used to work these mines. What if there's proof down there, records that would undermine Thornton's claim? Who would know? Silas looked at the injured miners, at the men who'd spent their lives working underground. They would. He knelt beside a conscious miner, young man maybe 25 with a gash across his forehead and fear in his eyes. "Son, I need to ask you something. The tunnel that collapsed. What was down there?" The miner's eyes flickered toward Thornton. He lowered his voice. "Old records office. From before the company bought the mine. They was supposed to clear it out months ago, but the foreman—" He stopped, swallowed. "The foreman said Thornton wanted it buried, said there was papers down there that could cause trouble." Clara's heart pounded. "Is the foreman one of the men trapped?" The miner nodded. "He knows something. Something Thornton wants to stay buried." The miner gripped Silas's arm. "Doc, you gotta get him out, before they stop digging." Clara looked toward the rescue effort. The men were still working, but slowly. Too slowly. And Thornton's men had positioned themselves near the entrance, watching everything. "They're going to let those men die," she whispered. "They're going to say it's too dangerous, call off the rescue, and bury the truth along with them." Silas stood. His hands were steady. His jaw was set. "Not if I can help it." He walked toward the mine entrance. Clara followed. Thornton stepped into their path. "Dr. Calhoun, surely you're not thinking of going down there. It's far too dangerous. Those men are dying. And we're doing everything we can to save them. But I can't risk more lives on a foolish rescue attempt." Silas met Thornton's eyes. "Get out of my way." Something shifted in Thornton's expression. The smooth mask slipped just for an instant. Clara saw the calculation behind it. The cold pragmatism of a man who viewed human lives as numbers on a ledger. "I'm afraid I can't do that," Thornton said. "As the owner of this mine, I have a responsibility to—" "You have a responsibility to the men who work for you." Silas's voice cut like a blade. "You have a responsibility to the families waiting to hear if their husbands and fathers are alive or dead. And right now you're failing every single one of them." The crowd had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. Thornton's smile returned, but it was brittle now. Strong words from a man who couldn't save a single child during the fever. Silas flinched, but he didn't back down. "You're right," he said. "I failed those children. I'll carry that guilt until the day I die. But I'm not going to fail these men." He stepped closer to Thornton. "And if you try to stop me, every person in this valley will know exactly what kind of man you really are." Thornton looked at the crowd, at the faces watching him, at the witnesses to whatever happened next. His calculations shifted. "Fine," he said. "Go down there. Get yourself killed trying to be a hero. Just don't expect me to dig your body out." He stepped aside. Silas grabbed a lantern from a nearby worker, headed toward the collapsed tunnel. Clara caught his arm. "I'm coming with you." "Clara! Don't argue with me. You need help. I can provide it." Silas looked at her, at the determination in her eyes, at the woman who'd traveled across the country to marry a stranger and found something worth fighting for. "All right," he said. "Stay close." They entered the darkness together. The tunnel was narrow. Clara could feel the weight of the earth pressing down from above. Every few feet, timber supports creaked and groaned like dying men. Silas moved ahead with the lantern. His steps were careful, but quick. "Can you hear them?" Clara whispered. "Shh." He stopped, listened. From somewhere deeper in the darkness came a sound. Faint, rhythmic, tapping. "That's them," Silas said. "They're signaling. They're alive." They moved faster now. The air grew thick and hard to breathe. Dust hung in the lantern light like fog. The tunnel narrowed further. Then it ended. A wall of collapsed rock and timber blocked their path. But at the top near the ceiling, a small gap remained. "Hello," Silas called. "Can you hear me?" Silence. Then a voice, weak and desperate. "We're here. 5 of us. Jenkins is hurt bad. Can't feel his legs. I'm a doctor. I'm coming through." Clara grabbed his arm. "Silas, if you move those rocks wrong." "I know." He handed her the lantern. "Hold this steady. I'll go through first. You follow with the supplies." He climbed toward the gap. Rocks shifted under his weight. Dust rained down. Clara held her breath. Silas squeezed through, disappeared into the darkness beyond. A moment of silence that felt like forever. Then his voice. "I'm through. Pass the bag." Clara pushed the medical supplies through the gap, heard Silas catch them on the other side. "Now you," he called. She climbed. The rocks scraped her hands, her arms, her back. The gap was barely wide enough for her shoulders. For a terrible moment, she felt stuck, trapped between tons of earth that could shift at any second. Then hands gripped hers, pulled her through. She tumbled into a larger space and Silas caught her before she fell. "You all right?" "Yes." She wasn't. Her heart was hammering. Her hands were shaking. But she pushed it down. "Where are they?" 5 men huddled against the far wall. 3 were conscious, watching Silas and Clara with hope and fear in their eyes. 2 lay motionless. One of the conscious men struggled to his feet. Gray-haired, weathered face, authority in his bearing even now. "You're the doc," he said. "Calhoun, I heard of you." "You're the foreman. Tom Reeves." He gestured at the unconscious men. "Jenkins got caught under a beam. Murphy hit his head on the way down. The others are just bruised and scared." Silas knelt beside Jenkins. Clara could see immediately how bad it was. The man's legs were crushed. Blood soaked his trousers from hip to knee. "I need more light," Silas said. Clara moved the lantern closer. "His spine might be damaged," Silas murmured. "If I move him wrong—" "If you don't move him, he dies down here," Reeves said flatly. Silas's jaw tightened. He looked at Clara. "I need you to hold his shoulders. Keep his spine straight. Don't let him twist." Clara positioned herself, placed her hands where Silas indicated. "On 3, Silas said. 1, 2, 3. They lifted Jenkins together. The man screamed a raw sound that echoed off the walls and seemed to shake the very rocks around them. "Easy," Silas said. "Easy. We've got you." They laid him on a flatter surface. Silas examined his legs with quick, efficient movements. "The bone's not severed," he said. "But both legs are broken, multiple fractures. He's lost a lot of blood." "Can you save him?" Reeves asked. "Maybe, if we get him out of here in the next hour." Reeves shook his head. "That gap you came through, it won't hold. Another collapse could happen any minute. Then we work fast." Clara helped Silas splint Jenkins' legs with pieces of broken timber. They worked in silence, hands moving together like they'd done this 100 times. While they worked, Clara watched Reeves. The foreman paced the small space, his eyes darting toward the collapsed entrance and back. "Mr. Reeves," she said quietly. "The young miner outside. He said there were papers down here, records that Thornton wanted buried." Reeves stopped pacing. His face went still. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." Clara kept her voice calm. "I think that's why Thornton arranged this cave-in, to bury whatever's down here, and to bury you along with it." Reeves was silent for a long moment. The only sound was Silas working on Jenkins, murmuring instructions to the injured man. "There's a room," Reeves finally said. 20 feet that way. Old records office from before the company bought the mine. Deed surveys, assay reports going back 30 years. "What's in them?" Reeves looked at Clara, then at Silas, then back at the collapsed entrance. "Proof," he said. "Proof that the mineral rights Thornton claims belong to the company were never legally transferred. The original owner, a man named Walter Calhoun, filed a competing claim before he died. It's still valid, which means my husband's uncle owned the mineral rights, Clara said. And they passed to Silas when his uncle died. Reeves nodded. Thornton found out about 6 months ago. He's been trying to destroy the evidence ever since, but I made copies, hid them in that records room. Clara felt her heart racing. Show me. Clara. Silas looked up from his patient. We don't have time. We have to make time. She met his eyes. This is everything, Silas. This is how we beat him. Silas held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. Go, but hurry. Reeves led Clara through a narrow side passage. The walls pressed close. The air was thick with dust. Here, Reeves said. A small room. Filing cabinets lined the walls, most of them crushed or overturned. But in the corner behind a fallen beam, a single cabinet remained intact. Reeves pried it open, pulled out a leather satchel. Everything's in here. Original deeds, survey maps, letters between the company and the territorial government. He pressed the satchel into Clara's hands. Guard this with your life. It's worth more than everything Thornton has. Clara clutched the satchel to her chest. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Reeves's face twisted. Thornton threatened my family. Said he'd have my wife and daughters removed from company housing. Said accidents happen to people who talk too much. He paused. But after what he did today, collapsing the mine with his own workers inside, I'm done protecting that man. A rumble shook the tunnel. Dust rained down. We need to move, Clara said. They ran back to the others. Silas had finished splinting Jenkins' legs. The man was pale but conscious, gripping Murphy's hand like a lifeline. We have to go now, Clara said. The whole thing's coming down. Jenkins can't climb through that gap, Silas said. We'll have to widen it. If we move those rocks, I know the risks. Silas looked at the trapped men. But we don't have a choice. They worked together. Clara and Reeves pulled rocks from the top of the pile while Silas stabilized the structure from below. Every stone they moved sent tremors through the tunnel. Almost there, Clara gasped. Just a few more. The ceiling groaned. A crack appeared in the timber above them. Everyone out! Silas shouted. Now! Clara scrambled through the widened gap, reached back to help pull the injured men through. Murphy came first, still dazed. Then the other miners, one by one. Jenkins was last. He screamed with every inch of movement, but he gritted his teeth and pushed through with Silas supporting him from behind. Silas was the last one through. He'd barely cleared the gap when the tunnel collapsed behind him. The roar was deafening. Dust billowed through the passage. Rocks crashed down where they'd been standing seconds before. Clara grabbed Silas's hand, pulled him away from the destruction. Go, she shouted. Go, go, go! They ran, dragged the injured, stumbled through the darkness toward the faint glow of torchlight ahead. They burst out of the mine entrance into chaos. The crowd surged forward. Families screamed names. Hands reached out to grab the rescued miners. Clara bent over, gasping for breath. The satchel was still clutched against her chest. She'd held onto it through everything. You made it. Mrs. Perkins appeared beside her. Good Lord, you actually made it. Where's Thornton? Clara demanded. Gone. Left right after you went in. Took his men with him. Mrs. Perkins' face was grim. Probably thought you'd die down there. Clara straightened, looked at Silas, who was already working on Jenkins's wounds with the help of other townspeople. He was wrong, Clara said. The next morning, Judge Morrison called an emergency session of the territorial court. Clara stood before the judge's bench with the leather satchel in her hands. Silas stood beside her. Behind them, the church basement was packed with every person in Silver Bend who could fit through the doors. Thornton sat in the front row with his lawyers. His face was smooth, confident, like a man who'd played this game 100 times and always won. Mrs. Calhoun, Morrison said, you claim to have evidence related to the ownership dispute over the Calhoun Ranch and the Silver Ridge mineral rights. I do, Your Honor. Present it. Clara opened the satchel, pulled out document after document, laid them on the judge's bench while the room held its breath. These are the original deeds filed by Walter Calhoun in 1865, she said. They show that he claimed not just surface rights to the land, but mineral rights to the entire valley. Thornton's lawyer jumped to his feet. Your Honor, these documents could be forgeries. They're on territorial paper with official seals. Morrison cut him off. I can verify their authenticity myself. Sit down, Mr. Harris. The lawyer sat. Clara continued. These letters show that the Silver Ridge Mining Company knew about Walter Calhoun's prior claim when they purchased the mine. They chose to ignore it, hoping the rightful owner would never come forward. Because the rightful owner was dead, Morrison said. No, Your Honor, because the rightful owner was Silas Calhoun, Walter's nephew, who inherited everything when his uncle died. Clara pulled out the final document. This is Walter Calhoun's will, filed and notarized in 1866. It specifically names Silas James Calhoun as the sole heir to all property, including mineral rights. The room erupted. Morrison banged his gavel. Order, order! Thornton rose to his feet. His face was no longer smooth. His eyes were hard and dangerous. Your Honor, this is absurd. Dr. Calhoun has been living on that land for 12 years without filing a proper claim. Any rights he might have had are void through abandonment. That's where you're wrong, Clara said. She pulled out one more piece of paper. This one was newer, fresh ink, multiple signatures. This is a productive use declaration, she said. Signed by 37 members of this community, attesting that Dr. Silas Calhoun has been providing essential medical services from his property for the past 4 weeks. Under territorial law that constitutes active use and development of the land. Morrison took the paper. Read it carefully. Mrs. Garrett, Samuel Garrett, Tom Patterson, Margaret Morrison. He looked up. My wife signed this. Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Calhoun diagnosed her condition when 3 Denver doctors couldn't. He's been treating her ever since. Morrison's expression shifted. Something personal entered his judicial demeanor. Mr. Thornton, he said slowly, do you have any evidence to refute these claims? Thornton's jaw was tight. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. Your Honor, the lawyer said, we request a continuance to examine these documents. Denied. Morrison set down his gavel. I've seen enough. The mineral rights to the Bitter Creek Valley belong to Silas Calhoun by inheritance and are validated by continuous productive use. The Silver Ridge Mining Company has no legal claim to the disputed territory. The room exploded again. This time, Morrison didn't try to quiet them. Clara turned to look at Silas. His face was pale. His hands were trembling. But his eyes were bright with something she hadn't seen before. Hope. Real, unguarded hope. Thornton pushed through the crowd toward them. His mask had finally cracked. Rage burned in his eyes. This isn't over, he hissed. You think a piece of paper protects you? I have resources you can't imagine. I'll tie this up in courts for years. You'll do nothing. The voice came from behind them. Everyone turned. A man in a federal marshal's uniform stood in the doorway. Behind him, 4 more marshals, all armed. Marcus Thornton, the marshal said. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, destruction of property, and fraud against the territorial government. Thornton's face went white. This is outrageous. On what evidence? Tom Reeves gave us a full statement this morning. The marshal moved forward, including details about how you arranged the cave-in to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses. He pulled out handcuffs. We've also been in contact with authorities in Montana where you pulled the same scheme 3 years ago. They're very interested in speaking with you. Thornton's lawyers backed away from him like he'd suddenly become contagious. The marshal locked the handcuffs around Thornton's wrists. You have the right to legal counsel, the marshal said, though I'd suggest finding better ones than these. They led Thornton out of the church. The crowd parted for them silent with shock. Clara watched him go, watched the man who'd tried to destroy everything disappear through the doors. Then she felt a hand slip into hers. Silas. He didn't speak. Just stood beside her holding her hand as the world they'd built together finally stopped trying to fall apart. That evening they sat on the porch of the ranch. The sky was turning purple and gold. The creek murmured its endless song. Somewhere in the distance, a nighthawk called. "It's over," Silas said quietly. "I keep waiting for something else to go wrong. Maybe nothing will." "You really believe that?" Clara looked at him, at the lines around his eyes, at the gray in his hair, at the hands that had trembled with fear and shame for 12 years, but had stayed steady when they needed to most. "I believe in you," she said. "That's enough." Silas was quiet for a long moment. "Clara." His voice was rough. "When you came here, I thought I was beyond saving. Thought the best I could hope for was someone who'd tolerate me. Share the loneliness for a while." He turned to face her. "I didn't expect you." "What did you expect?" "Someone who'd see the broken doctor hiding in a canyon. Who'd see the shame and the failure and the 12 years of running." He paused. "Instead, I got you. Someone who saw what I could be, who pushed me to become it." Clara felt her throat tighten. "You became it yourself," she said. "I just held the lamp." Silas shook his head. "You did more than that. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You stayed when everyone else ran." His hand found hers. "I don't know how to thank you for that." "You don't have to thank me." "Then let me say something else." He turned to face her fully. "Clara May Calhoun, I married you because I was desperate and lonely and couldn't face another winter alone. But I'm asking you now as the man I've become instead of the man I was." His voice cracked. "Will you stay? Not because you have to, because you want to." Clara looked at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes, at the hope he was offering, fragile as glass and twice as precious. "Silas James Calhoun," she said. "I've been wanting to stay since the moment I saw that room full of medical supplies. Since I watched you save that boy's arm. Since I pulled you through that collapsed tunnel." She squeezed his hand. "I'm not going anywhere." The stars emerged one by one. The ranch settled into peaceful silence, and for the first time in 12 years, the valley didn't feel like a hiding place. It felt like home. 3 weeks passed. The summer heat settled over the valley like a blessing. The creek ran clear and cold. The garden Clara had started behind the house was already showing green shoots pushing through dark soil. And every day people came to the ranch. Not to threaten, not to condemn, to heal. Clara woke that morning to the sound of wagon wheels on the road. She'd learned to recognize that sound to rise before Silas and start the coffee and prepare the front room for whoever needed help. Today, it was the Patterson family. The baby had a fever. Mrs. Patterson's face was tight with fear as she handed the child to Silas. "She wouldn't eat this morning," Mrs. Patterson said. "Wouldn't stop crying. Then she went quiet. That's worse, isn't it? When they go quiet." Silas examined the baby with gentle hands. Clara watched him work. His movements were confident now, steady. The trembling only came at night sometimes in dreams she'd learned to wake him from. "It's an ear infection," Silas said. "Common in babies this age. Painful, but not dangerous if we treat it." Mrs. Patterson's knees buckled. Her husband caught her. "She's going to be all right," Mrs. Patterson whispered. "She's going to be fine." Silas handed the baby back. "I'll mix up a poultice. Keep it warm against her ear. The fever should break by morning." Clara prepared the medicine, while Silas gave instructions. This had become their rhythm. He diagnosed. She mixed. They worked side by side like two halves of the same person. When the Pattersons left, another wagon was already coming up the road. Old Pete Dawson this time. His leg was healing well, but he liked to stop by anyway. Said the coffee was better here than anywhere in the territory. "Heard something in town," Pete said, settling into the chair Clara offered. "Thought you'd want to know." "What's that?" Silas asked. "Henry Miller's wife is sick, bad sick. Won't let anyone near her. Won't send for help." Pete shook his head. "Stubborn as her husband, that one. But folks are worried." Clara and Silas exchanged glances. Henry Miller, the man who'd accused Silas of killing his nephew, the man who'd led the opposition against them for 12 years. "What kind of sick?" Silas asked. "Don't know. She collapsed in the general store yesterday. Mrs. Perkins said she looked gray, like all the blood had drained out of her." Silas's jaw tightened. Clara could see the conflict in his eyes, the old fear warring with the new purpose. "We should go," Clara said quietly. "He won't let me near her." "Then we don't ask permission." They rode to the Miller ranch that afternoon. It was a modest spread, bigger than theirs, but showing signs of neglect. Fence posts leaning, a barn door hanging crooked, the kind of slow decay that happens when a man's attention is elsewhere. Henry Miller met them at the gate. His face was haggard. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Get off my land," he said. Silas didn't move. "I heard your wife is sick." "That ain't your concern." "I'm a doctor. It's exactly my concern." Miller's hands clenched into fists. "You're no doctor. You're a coward who let my nephew die." Clara stepped forward. "Mr. Miller, whatever happened 12 years ago, whatever you think my husband did or didn't do, your wife needs help. Are you really going to let her suffer because you can't let go of the past?" Miller's jaw worked. His eyes flickered to the house behind him. "She won't see anyone," he said. His voice cracked. "Says there's no point. Says she's dying and doesn't want strangers watching." "Is she dying?" Clara asked. Miller's face crumpled. For a moment, he looked like a frightened child instead of a bitter old man. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't know what's wrong with her. She just keeps getting weaker. Won't eat. Won't drink. Just lies there staring at the ceiling." Silas stepped closer. "Let me see her. Please. If I can't help, we'll leave. You'll never have to look at me again. But if there's a chance—" Miller stared at him. Seconds passed that felt like hours. Then he stepped aside. The bedroom was dim. Martha Miller lay in the bed so still that Clara thought for a moment they were too late. Then her chest rose slightly. Fell. Silas moved to her side, took her hand, felt her pulse. "Mrs. Miller, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened, clouded with pain and exhaustion. "You," she whispered. "The doctor who couldn't save Daniel." "Yes, ma'am." "Come to watch me die too?" "No, ma'am. Come to see if I can help." Martha Miller studied his face for a long moment. Then she closed her eyes. "Do what you want. Don't matter anymore." Silas examined her with the same thoroughness Clara had watched him use on dozens of patients now. He checked her pulse, her eyes, her tongue, pressed gently on her abdomen, asked questions about her symptoms. Clara watched from the doorway, watched his hands move with certainty, watched the fear that had paralyzed him for 12 years stay locked away where it belonged. "How long has she been bleeding?" Silas asked suddenly. Henry Miller went pale. "How did you—" "There's blood on the sheets, hidden under the blanket, but I can see the stain." Silas looked at Miller. "How long?" 3 weeks, maybe 4. She made me promise not to tell anyone, said it was shameful." Silas turned back to Martha. "Mrs. Miller, I need to examine you more thoroughly. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Do I have your permission?" Martha's eyes opened again. Something had changed in them, a flicker of hope where there had been none. "Yes," she said. Clara helped with the examination. It was intimate work, the kind that required trust and discretion. Martha gripped Clara's hand through the worst of it. When it was over, Silas stepped back. His face was grave. "What is it?" Miller demanded. "What's wrong with her? She has a growth. In her womb." Silas paused. "It's causing the bleeding, making her weak." Miller's face went gray. "A growth? You mean?" "I mean it needs to come out. Surgery." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. "You can do that?" Clara asked quietly. Silas looked at her. In his eyes she saw everything, the fear, the doubt, the weight of 12 years of failure, and beneath it all, the steady certainty of a man who knew what he had to do. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I've done similar operations during the war, but that was a long time ago. And the conditions here—" He shook his head. "There's no guarantee." "What happens if you don't operate?" Miller asked. "She dies. Slow. Painful. A few weeks, maybe less." Miller looked at his wife, at the woman he'd loved for 30 years, lying pale and broken in their marriage bed. "Do it," he said. The surgery took 4 hours. Clara assisted. She'd never done anything like this before, but Silas guided her through every step. His voice was calm, steady, even when his hands moved through procedures that made her stomach turn. They worked by lamplight in the kitchen, Martha laid out on the table unconscious from the chloroform Silas had carefully administered. "Clamp here," Silas said. "Hold it steady." Clara held. "Now hand me the scalpel. The small one." She handed it. "Good. Don't look away. I need you to watch for bleeding." She watched. The growth was larger than Silas had expected. Removing it required precision Clara didn't know he possessed. But his hands never wavered. Not once. When it was over, Silas stitched the incision closed with tiny, perfect sutures. Clara cleaned the wound, applied bandages. Martha's breathing was shallow but steady. "Will she live?" Miller stood in the doorway, his face the color of old ash. "The surgery was successful," Silas said. "The growth is out, but the next few days are critical. Infection is the real danger now. She'll need constant care. I'll stay with her. You'll need help. Someone with medical training." Silas looked at Clara. "My wife can show you what to do, how to change the bandages, what signs to watch for." Miller's jaw trembled. He walked to the table where his wife lay, took her hand, pressed it to his lips. "I blamed you," he said without looking at Silas, "for Daniel, for everything. Made you the villain in my story because I couldn't face the truth." "What truth?" Silas asked quietly. "That I wasn't there. When Daniel got sick, I was 2 days right away buying cattle. My wife sent for help, but by the time I got home—" Miller's voice broke. "He was already gone, and I needed someone to hate, someone to punish." Silas didn't respond, just stood there waiting. "I'm sorry," Miller said, "for what I said, what I did, how I turned this town against you." He finally looked up. His eyes were wet. "You didn't let my nephew die. The fever did that. You just happened to be here when it happened." "I could have tried harder," Silas said. "Maybe. Maybe not. Doesn't matter now." Miller straightened. "What matters is you saved my wife, when you had every reason to let her die. Every reason to turn your back on us the way we turned ours on you." Clara watched the two men face each other, 12 years of hatred and guilt and misunderstanding hanging between them. "I'm a doctor," Silas said simply. "This is what I do." Miller extended his hand. Silas took it. They stayed with the Millers for 3 days. Clara taught Henry how to care for his wife, how to clean the wound, how to watch for fever, how to mix the medicines that would help her heal. On the third day, Martha opened her eyes and asked for water. On the fourth day, she sat up and took broth. On the fifth day, she smiled at her husband and called him an old fool for worrying so much. When Clara and Silas finally rode home, the whole valley knew what had happened. Word traveled fast in small communities. By the time they reached the ranch, 3 more families were waiting with ailments they'd been too afraid to mention before. The summer passed in a blur of patience and progress. Silas built an addition to the house. A proper examination room with a real medical table and shelves for supplies. Clara organized everything, kept records, scheduled appointments. Mrs. Perkins donated supplies from her store. Old Pete built furniture. The Patterson family brought food every week, more than Clara and Silas could ever eat. The community that had shunned Silas for 12 years embraced him now. Not because he'd changed, because they finally saw who he'd always been. One evening in late August, Clara found Silas standing in the doorway of the medical room. Just standing there, looking at the shelves full of supplies, the instruments laid out with such care. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking about the man I was when you arrived." His voice was rough, broken, hiding, waiting to die alone in this canyon. And now, he turned to face her. "Now I'm thinking about the man I want to be, the man you helped me become." Clara moved closer. "You did the hard work. I just believed in you." "That was the hard work." Silas took her hands. "Nobody believed in me. Not for 12 years. Not even myself. Then you showed up with your $4 and your dead husband's ring and your stubborn refusal to run." Clara smiled. "I'm still not running. I know." He lifted her hands to his lips, kissed them gently. "That's the miracle, Clara. Not that you stayed that first night, that you keep staying, every day, every crisis, every moment I doubt myself. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." The words hung between them, simple, true. Silas pulled her close, held her the way he'd been afraid to hold anyone for 12 years, like she might break, like she might disappear. She held him back, solid, real, present. "I love you," he said. The words came out rough, unpracticed, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. Clara's breath caught. In all the weeks since their wedding, through all the crises and victories and quiet moments, neither of them had said it. The marriage had started as a business arrangement, a convenience, something to survive. But it had become so much more. "I love you too," she said. Silas's arms tightened around her. She felt his chest shudder, felt the wetness on her shoulder where his face pressed against her. 12 years of loneliness, 12 years of guilt and shame and hiding, all of it breaking apart like ice in spring. She held him while he wept. Didn't say anything, didn't need to. Some wounds needed silence to heal. The celebration happened 3 days later. Someone decided that the valley needed a proper gathering, a chance to mark the changes that had come, to honor the people who'd made them happen. They held it at the ranch. 40 people came, maybe more. Families from all over the valley bringing food and music and children who ran screaming through the fields like wild things. Mrs. Perkins organized the women. They set up tables covered with every kind of dish Clara had ever seen. Roasted chickens and fresh bread and pies that smelled like heaven. The men gathered around Silas, clapped him on the back, told stories about the surgeries he'd performed, the lives he'd saved, the grumpy old doctor who'd come out of hiding to help his neighbors. Judge Morrison arrived with his wife on his arm. Margaret Morrison was still weak, but she was standing, walking, living, thanks to Silas's treatment. "Dr. Calhoun," Morrison said formally. "Mrs. Calhoun, on behalf of the territory of Wyoming, I want to present you with this." He handed Silas an envelope. Inside was a document with an official seal. Clara read over Silas's shoulder. "A medical license," she breathed. "Territorial certification." "You're official now," Morrison said. "Took some doing. Had to write to half a dozen authorities. But after what you did for my wife, he cleared his throat. Let's just say people were happy to expedite the paperwork. Silas stared at the document. His hands were trembling again, but not from fear. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing what you're doing. Morrison smiled. This valley needs you. Always did. Just took us too long to realize it. The party continued into the evening. Music filled the air. Someone had brought a fiddle. Someone else had a guitar. People danced in the fading light, kicking up dust that glowed golden in the sunset. Clara found a quiet moment on the porch, sat on the step, and watched the celebration unfold before her. 4 months ago, she'd been a widow in Tennessee with nothing but $4 and a dead man's ring. She'd answered an advertisement out of desperation, traveled across the country to marry a stranger. Now she had a home, a husband, a community that felt like family. Silas sat down beside her. You're missing the party, he said. Just watching, taking it in. Taking what in? Clara gestured at the crowd, at the children playing, at the couples dancing, at the tables covered with food that neighbors had brought to share. All of this, everything we built. Silas followed her gaze. His face was soft in the evening light. The lines around his eyes had changed. They curved upward now instead of down. We didn't build it alone, he said. No, but we started it. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. You started it when you decided to save that boy's arm. You started it when you stayed. They sat in comfortable silence. The fiddle played a slow waltz. Couples swayed together in the gathering dusk. Clara, Silas's voice was quiet. I need to tell you something. What? The night before you arrived. The night before the stagecoach brought you here. He paused. I was going to end it, put a bullet in my head, and be done with the whole miserable existence. Clara's blood went cold. She lifted her head, looked at him. I had the gun loaded, Silas continued. His voice was steady, but she could hear the old pain beneath it. Sat on this very porch with it in my lap. Spent half the night trying to work up the courage. What stopped you? I don't know. Maybe cowardice. Maybe some part of me still hoped for something different. He met her eyes. Then the sun came up, and I remembered you were coming, the fourth bride, the one who probably wouldn't stay past sunset just like the others. Clara's throat was tight. She couldn't speak. I told myself I'd wait, see what happened. If you ran like the others, I'd finish what I started that night. Silas took her hand. But you didn't run. You saw that room full of medical supplies, and you didn't see a monster. You saw a man worth saving. Tears burned Clara's eyes. You were always worth saving, she whispered. Maybe, but I could not see it. Not until you showed me. He squeezed her hand. You saved my life, Clara. Not just by staying, by believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself, by pushing me to be the man I'd forgotten I could be. Clara wiped her eyes with her free hand. That first night, she said, when I saw those medical supplies, those books, those instruments you'd kept for 12 years without knowing why. She paused. I knew. I knew you were waiting for something, someone. I just didn't know if I was strong enough to be that person. And now, Clara looked at the celebration before them, at the community they'd built together, at the life that had grown from two broken people choosing to believe in each other. Now I know we're both strong enough, she said, because we're not alone anymore. The fiddle shifted to a new song, something bright and hopeful. Silas stood, offered his hand. Dance with me. Clara took his hand. Let him pull her to her feet. They joined the other couples, moved together in the fading light. Around them, the valley celebrated. Children laughed. Music soared. Life stubborn and beautiful continued. Clara rested her head against Silas's chest, felt his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. I love you, she said again. I know. His arms tightened around her. "I love you too. More than I knew I could love anything." The stars emerged one by one. The celebration gradually wound down. Families loaded into wagons and headed home, calling goodbyes and promises to return. When the last wagon disappeared down the road, Clara and Silas stood alone in the clearing. The ranch was quiet. The lamplight glowed through the windows. The medical room waited for tomorrow's patients. The garden was growing. The house was home. 4 months, Clara said softly. 4 months ago, I was a widow with nothing left to lose. And now? She looked at him. At the man who'd been broken and hiding and ready to die. At the man who'd found his way back to life, one patient at a time. Now I have everything. Silas pulled her close, kissed her forehead, her cheek, her lips. "So do I," he said. They walked inside together, closed the door on the darkness, let the lamplight wrap around them like a blessing. Outside, the valley slept beneath a blanket of stars. The creek sang its endless song. The canyon walls stood guard, no longer a prison, but a shelter. And in the house that 3 brides had fled, 2 people who'd chosen each other found the peace they'd been searching for all along. Not because the darkness was gone, but because they'd learned to carry light together.